Today, we're looking at unconscious contracts in racism. And one of the things that I like to begin with is a sense of, like, what is beloved community? And you can see here photographs of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and also Bell Hooks, both of whom, first Martin Luther King and then Bell Hooks following Martin Luther King, spoke so compellingly and wrote so beautifully about the importance of the idea of beloved community. And I got to say, during the last presidential stretch before Biden, I was really struggling a lot with what the heck were people doing? And that kind of continues today with some of the decisions that are being made politically in Florida and the Supreme Court corruption. It's like, oh my God, what world do I live in? And I was finding it really hard to find solid ground to stand on. I mean, I would walk around and it was like a 3.5 year trauma cycle for me of walking around and going, what the fuck? What do these, where is the integrity? What is happening with people? Where is the integrity? And thank goodness at that point I stumbled across both. Roxy asked me to co-teach a class with her, teaching Martin Luther King's from the work from the standpoint of nonviolent communication. And I also started reading Kazu Haga's beautiful book, Healing Resistance. And it was, both of these experiences were an invitation to step into, just to step onto the solid, it makes me cry, but to step onto the solid ground of love for everybody. Just like loving the heck out of everybody, even though what they were doing, and continues today with this Supreme Court corruption stuff, was so against every bone of integrity in my entire body. So, I just want to say, if you're like feeling really uncomfortable that I'm talking about this, I just received a letter yesterday about people who are feeling uncomfortable about me talking about this. So you're in good company. And you're welcome to let us know and get a little resonant response and reflection and care, because what I'm wanting to do is to give you a sense of beloved community, the idea that everybody belongs, not being something easy, that it is really effing hard. And that it's really hard. Yeah, it's just really hard. How do we open our hearts when people are doing stuff that we don't want them to be doing? How do we open our hearts when the world is so far from what we want it to be? So that's really our focus for today, is how do we open our hearts when the world is so far from what we want it to be? And one of the ways we can work with this is to work with our unconscious contracts. And if you're like, I've already worked with my unconscious contracts about these issues, you can just say, what is my unconscious contract today? That is filtering my view. That's letting me, sometimes it's like, what's letting me continue to hate? Sometimes it's what's stopping me from seeing. So this is an eternal journey, in my view, this journey toward an internal holding of beloved community as the most important thing. Because, this stuff happens and you're like, what the heck is going on? And you get knocked off your balance. So this is where we're going today. That's what I wanted to say about beloved community. And if you'd like to work from the point of view of having privilege, no matter whether you're in the global majority or whether you're white, so the global majority is this wonderful term that was developed by a woman in England to help us acknowledge that white people are not the majority skin color on planet Earth, that actually the global majority is people who are not white. And so that's, you'll know now what I'm using the word global majority for. If you'd like to work from the point of view of having privilege, this work might be most interesting to you today. So if you don't identify as white-skinned, you can, if you'd like to, although I will present global majority contracts, the experience of having less privilege in a system contract, so you can work from that point of view too. But if you do not identify as white-skinned, you can choose your next highest point of ease and privilege in your life to work with today's class. This could be caste, it could be having wealth or financial ease, it could be being cisgendered or heterosexual, it could be living in Europe or North America, it could be being a native English speaker, it could be being able-bodied, being neurotypical. You could choose any of those if you'd like to. And I love this quote by Janaya Khan, who was co-founder of Black Lives Matter of Toronto. Privilege isn't about what you've gone through. It's about what you haven't had to go through. And I'd like you to take a look at the graphic that I'll show on the next screen and ask yourself, what are the forms of privilege that I have or don't have that I'd like to name? You can choose your top 3, you can choose your bottom 3 if you'd like. And you can kind of see that there's a privilege oppression coin that we can be on either side of, with whatever form of intersectionality, whatever forms of intersectionality are ours. So take a look here, and just for today, you know, if you've always been upper and middle class and wealthy, but you're no longer young, you get to go, okay, upper and middle class, wealthy, white, and then getting older, too old, you know, and you can take a look here and just see, where are you? If you've always, you know, if you're a person of color, it doesn't say global majority here, a person of color, then you might be also English speaking, you might be literate, you might be heterosexual, for example. So you can just take a look. I'll just hold silence for just 60 seconds or so and let people look. I wanted to say, I have some really cool quotes about this stuff, so I'm going to read a couple of them. A note about LGBTQ plus and current oppression and the state of the repressive world in general. The backlash against LGBTQ plus is a last desperate attempt that conservatives are making to hammer an infinitely complex world into a small, unthreatening shape, to enforce a fantastical reality where challenging subjects simply don't exist, to hold themselves up in a crumbling fortress as the floods come in and let their own children pay the price. And N.D. Stevenson wrote this about LGBTQ+, but this can be about anti-racism, the backlash against anti-racism, the backlash against climate crisis knowledge. If today we were working with the oppression of female-bodied people, most of us would be on the receiving rather than the administering end of the stick. That is much more comfortable to consider. And you are welcome to come at this question from this point of view. But if we don't consider our privilege, we don't have to feel the shame of having more than other people have. This is a big shame when we start to learn about anti-racism. And it would be much more comfortable for everyone who is white-skinned and for all of us as we consider our points of privilege to go below the line. I love the book, The Trauma of Caste. I recommend it very highly. It's a book by Thenmoji Soundararajan, who is a person from the Dalit people in India. And she wrote this beautiful book, which is about how caste has shown up in the United States now, how it's been imported with Indian immigrants. And there's something so amazing for me about being able to read about the phenomenon of oppression, and just for a moment for it to take me out of the struggle, absolutely, and to be able to kind of see the whole. It's an extraordinary book. Plus, it's incredibly helpful to know about these issues of caste and how they've been imported into the United States. She writes, "It is much easier to rest in a narrative of victimhood than it is to sit in the discomfort of the fact that you have benefited from someone else's dehumanization. That discomfort is so much to bear that it is easier to turn away than it is to engage with the dispossessed." And then also another spectacular book that I recommend very highly, The Physiology of Sexist and Racist Oppression by Sharon Sullivan. In societies where legalized discrimination has been eliminated, white privilege continues to operate as much, if not more so, through human biology than through mental beliefs, hidden and invisible, because it is a product of gut reactions rather than conscious decisions or choice. So let's begin with the meat of our work. Receding systemic oppression and white supremacy results in great harm for those in the global majority. The ongoing stress of living at the receiving end of white supremacy and systemic oppression results in PTSD. People have all these symptoms. Folks who are in the global majority living in the US and Western Europe and Eastern Europe have all these symptoms: intrusive, distressing thoughts, recurrent bad nightmares, flashbacks, emotional upsets at reminders, intense physical reactions at reminders. They are under a stress. There is a stress when we are receiving white supremacy and systemic oppression that includes trying to create a life where it can be avoided, where we can be detached and cut off from others, where there's an impaired range of emotions, changed planned future plans and hopes, and really intense physical hyperarousal stuff, difficulty sleeping, irritability outbursts, difficulty concentrating, overly alert, jumpy, easily startled. So the impact on the nervous system is sympathetic activation and immobilization. Sympathetic activation with that hypervigilance, the fight, the flight, the unnamed alarmed aloneness, unnamed disgust. Immobilization then at the helplessness, hopelessness, paralysis, resignation, giving up, depression, meaningless, senselessness, sense of futility. And the costs are, for the global majority, financial well-being, security, access to resources, well-being of children, sense of a future. The health costs include illnesses, access to healthcare, unequal treatment, and more limited self-care options, and a spiritual cost of meaning. And then there are costs for white folks that are never mentioned and rarely spoken of because, well, the same thing, right, never mentioned, not even known. So here are some of the costs. These are only a few. Constraints in capacity for warmth and empathy due to the ongoing need to block the suffering of global majority peoples to maintain status quo. So just take a moment. You know about global vaccine inequality. How often are you blocking yourself from your mourning about global vaccine inequality if vaccine is an important issue, if access to vaccine is an important issue to you? Those blocks that we put up are then blocking our warmth and empathy, our flow, our commitment to beloved community. Guilt, helplessness, shame, unstable sense of self-worth. Was my rank or status earned, or was it awarded unfairly? Trauma symptoms from witnessing and possibly participating in the denigration and abuse of others. Internalized feelings of powerlessness and hopelessness, impacted to a greater or lesser degree by the same restrictions from resources that the tiered system of whiteness was designed to obscure. Erasure of and disconnection from culture, tradition, spirituality. And how are the systems we are enrolled in harmful to folks with less privilege? Patrice, hello, you have a hand up.
I've just
Yeah,
unmuted.
originally it wouldn't let me unmute. Two things. Could you, that slide, the next to the last one, impacted by the same restrictions that the system, Could you say more about that one? And then, can we also have a pause after that?
Sure. So the restrictions are what we're referring to here is the way in which the inequality of wealth impacts people in the lower economic tiers who are white as well, but the inequality of capitalism is masked by the use of white supremacy to give people who are white and poor the crumbs of something, at least they're better than somebody. Is this, I'm sure this is a familiar social theory piece to you, Patrice, yeah? Do we need to unmute Patrice again?
Yeah. Yes, I did, but I wasn't sure that everyone would be clear about that. And it's a really important point.
Yeah.
When I was a child, my mom, we went to some school desegregation things, and there were attempts with, I was born and raised in Boston, with white people who were from South Boston, who were poor and Irish, which the treatment of Irish people when they first came to this country was horrific. And trying to get them to see that we all wanted the same thing, better schools for our kids. But there was no ability to be in solidarity about that because they were white and we were Black. And so they were better and we were less than. And they had horrible schools too.
I'm just taking a moment to be stunned. And of course, I mean, it's familiar stuff, but it's stunning every time. Thank you very much, Patrice. And you'd like a small pause, yes? We'll just pause for 30 seconds and let folks kind of breathe and notice that you're here and that you're loved. And so I'm going to go through the ways that the systems we are enrolled in are harmful to folks with less privilege, because the next things we're going to do is to begin to work on, like, why is our body folding in half, if it is, when we try to allow ourselves to understand impact? Because my body still collapses in on itself when I try to understand impact. So I'm going to read this, just notice your body, and we're going to work today with unconscious contracts that are part of the thing that's folding our bodies in half. Sexual trauma, abuse, assault, harassment, generations of rape, with no systemic recourse for redress and specific targeting of folks with less privilege. Directed violence, killings, burnings, and bombings, hate crimes. Trauma at the hands of police and courts, police brutality, police killings, false accusations, wrongful and extreme sentencing, unequal treatment for the same crimes, lack of prosecution, perpetrators acting against bodies with less privilege. Educational trauma, poor education, unequal access to resources, assumption of inferiority. Medical trauma, denial of treatment, unequal response to symptoms, use of less privileged bodies without consent, forced sterilization, unequal access to resources, wealth, and insurance, unequal access to vaccines, and also under medical trauma, incapacity to fully comprehend the pain that a person in another race is in. Economic trauma, unequal access to resources, systemic prohibition of the gathering of wealth, preferred hiring and promotion of people with more privilege. And social traumas, microaggressions, exclusion, being ignored and dismissed. Some people call microaggressions everyday racism, which is, I think, a very good term for it, and more. So just take a moment, even maybe write down how your body's doing. In the areas where you have privilege, how does your body do when you hear how you benefit from a system that harms others? In the areas where you don't have privilege, how does your body respond to the naming of harm? When we have any kind of negative messages, or when our body goes blank, or when the grief is too great for us, we're falling into the no self-compassion chasm. How can we find our unconscious contracts? We can ask, what are the negative messages we are starting to tell ourselves as we focus on this material? And we can also ask, how does my body go numb as we begin to focus on this material? If you're from the global majority, yeah.
And Sarah, before you even go there, would you just define what an unconscious contract is?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking, Jaya. I have these ideas before I start putting together this stuff for a webinar. And then like Jaya says something and I'm like, oh, an entire chunk of my plan was completely left out. Okay, so unconscious contracts are the agreements that we make with ourselves, usually without even knowing. Sometimes we know a little bit. The unconscious contracts are agreements we make with ourselves to close off to things, or to believe that we're bad, or to believe that the world should be simple and it just must be something about us that we're not finding it simple at all, or that we'll look at this one, that we will do no harm, that we will live without doing any harm. We'll discover how problematic this contract is in just a moment. But the way that this works is that the amygdala, the part of the brain that holds our emotions, when it gets activated, it creates a flow of cortisol that shuts down our ability to make sense of the world. And the amygdala really, really, really wants the difficult moment, whatever it is, never to happen again. So it folds possibilities down into the basal ganglia, the part of the brain that handles kind of what we do in response to in response to trauma. And it creates behavioral prohibitions and patterns. And those behavioral prohibitions and patterns and stories that we tell ourselves and about the world prevent us from being with what is true. And they prevent us from being with what is true about ourselves. For example, we could have an unconscious contract to believe that we are bad. I will believe that I am bad and wrong, that I'm just not enough. In order to, and then now here's the interesting thing. With these words, in order to, we're saying to our brain that what our brain has always thought was the truth is actually a functional belief rather than the truth. I will believe I am bad. You used to think it was, I will believe I am bad because I am bad. But if you say, I will believe I'm bad, or I will believe I'm not enough, or I will believe that I'm stupid, or I don't have the mental capacity to understand these things, or whatever it is your brain is doing, then you say, in order to, I will believe this in order to. Then that order to sort of becomes a shovel that lets us get almost all the way down into the basal ganglia and figure out what is the trauma that we are trying to protect ourselves from that gives us our unconscious contract. So if we have a do no harm contract, which is problematic because, dang it, we're all becoming more and more aware that we cannot live in this world without doing harm. Each of us who has white skin is living off the labor, the unpaid labor of enslavement to create this country. Each of us who has white skin received unequal access to loans and mortgages for homes. Our families did throughout the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Continuing because, of course, now the house prices have gone so high that you have to have family wealth to be able to get into the housing market. And if you are African American, you are specifically prohibited from being able to accumulate family wealth. Every one of us on this call is using this beautiful internet that lets us decrease fossil fuels in some ways, but the enormous houses, the enormous buildings that are run that take care of all of the data flow, those use immense amounts of carbon. We are all carbon consumers. There is no way not to be. We cannot live without doing harm. So if we have a do no harm vow, I will not do any harm. I swear to myself that I will do no harm. Then here we are up against the truth. We can't look at the truth. If we look at the truth, then we realize that we're breaking our contract, not releasing it, but breaking it, inadvertently going against our own integrity. We cannot bear to look. We cannot see. And when we cannot see, we cannot vote properly. And when we cannot prioritize anti-racism, we are supporting racism. Okay, nod at me if I'm making any sense here. Okay, good. Okay. All right. Jaya, how did you think I did? Did you hear anything that needs to be said that I missed?
But if folks have questions, you're very welcome to ask.
Yeah.
You can send them to me privately.
Yeah.
And
And
keep going on that tangent.
yeah, well, it's not a tangent at all. It was supposed to be in the presentation, but I forgot it. Genevieve says the information here is overwhelming in many ways. No effing kidding, Genevieve. It's so true. And delivered at a pace that I find hard to follow. That also is true. Yeah. Will we have access to the recording? Absolutely. Oh, and someone's requesting that I do a trigger warning before talking about sexual trauma. I beg your pardon, everybody. I didn't say a trigger warning for that. And Marcia writes, each of us is taking more from the earth than we give. Brings me tears, Marcia. Pam says, we can't look at the truth. Yeah. Okay. So, what are our unconscious contracts? Here are some possible, that Roxy helped to develop this list of unconscious contracts that might be problematic for folks from the global majority. I swear to you, my essential self, that I will submit to anything in order to survive at any cost. I will not rock the boat in order to keep the community safe. These can all be mixed and matched. I will stay in harm's way in order to help my family and kids. I will not name this injustice in order to accommodate and find strength to move on, to go on. I will numb out to find some path to happiness. I will buy into the system to get whatever advantage I can gain, even over my people. I will ignore the harm happening to others in order to be in integrity. I will always speak up in order to keep the community safe. I'll never be silent again in order to help my family and kids, no matter the cost to myself. So anytime that we have to do something, no matter the cost to ourselves, then we don't have full choice. Like, it would be really good not to have to submit to everything. It would be really good to be able to rock the boat sometimes when it's not going to kill us or somebody else. Because we always, as we make these agreements with ourselves, the very most important thing is flexibility and responsiveness and the way to learn new things. Here are some problematic contracts for beneficiaries of white supremacy and colonization. I solemnly swear to you, my essential self, that I will do no harm in order to earn my right to be alive, that I won't ever hurt anyone in order to create the world I want to live in, that I will not be helpless or feel helpless in order to belong in my community, that I will not participate in systems of oppression in order to find ways to trust that I have value, that I will not see or acknowledge systems of oppression in order to secure access to the resources me and my community need to survive, that I will not speak up against the actions of my family and community in order to belong in my community, no matter the cost to myself. Now, the book, this wonderful book that we're here in honor of, that Roxy and I co-wrote, The Antiracist Heart, does have unconscious contracts of all kinds scattered throughout it. So if you're starting to go, wow, I have not thought of these things. This is really interesting. How do I learn more? How do I do some work with myself beyond this call? Then this is an ideal book for you to investigate. The Antiracist Heart, a Self-Compassion and Activism Handbook. Before we go to working with contracts, which we will right now, I just wanted to make a quick differentiation between individual harm and systemic harm. So collective responsibility, also known as collective guilt, is a concept in which individuals are responsible for systemic actions and history by benefiting from, remaining blind to, ignoring, tolerating, minimizing, harboring, or using or leveraging systemic actions and history without actively collaborating in these actions. So I didn't actively collaborate in the Fannie Mae mortgage regulations that legally made it impossible for people of the global majority to borrow money. But I have a house with my husband. I benefit from the system, even though I did nothing in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. So we all benefit in various ways. If we're thinking about climate crisis, everybody in North America has a larger carbon footprint than any single person in Lagos, Nigeria. So even if we're homeless in America, we're taking up more carbon than somebody who lives in Africa. So I wonder if is this all, just nod at me if I'm making sense. Yeah, okay, good. All right, now. We are all at different points on the continuum from individual to collective responsibility, and we all bear both individual and collective responsibility for the areas where we have privilege. So the negative messages that we might have often come particularly from unconscious do no harm vows. So we'll look at those. We cannot both be alive and do no harm, but we don't want to know this. We ache to be able to do no harm. When we have to know the harm we have done just by being alive, sometimes we don't want to be alive anymore. The refusal to know the harm we do stops us from seeing the systemic harm that each of us inflicts simply by being alive. The more power we have, the more resources we consume, and the more harm we do to our planet and to those with less power. This is the paradox of being alive. This is the burden of living in the global north. This is the burden of being white. It is not escapable. Growing up involves seeing our responsibility, growing our faith that the more our gifts emerge, the more good we do, and the more meaning and healing we bring to our broken human world. So we're going to be able to work with this in just a moment, but Pam, you had your hand up for a second. Do you want to say something?
The last two slides, the one before the last one was about our being collectively responsible and individually responsible. And then the next one that you just did was why that's true and how painful that is.
Yeah, and how we don't want to know.
And how we don't want to know. And it's just, I'm just having trouble integrating it. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. So we could start by saying, okay, how is my body doing in this experience? We can do this. We'll do this a little bit. Jaya, I have like 40 minutes, right? Okay. We'll do this for a little minute in the group, just so that people can start to see the variety of things that are coming for folks. First thing, if you're willing, put how your body responds to beginning to ask yourself to look at the extent of systemic harm that comes from racism. Just notice what kinds of body sensations you have. If you go numb, put numbness. If you dissociate and get a little spacey, put that. If you kind of feel like your heart folds, put that. If your stomach hurts, put that. Just whatever's true for you. Lots of cool stuff here. Cool stuff on heart stuff. Grief, tightness in neck and shoulders, tears, energized, shutting down, lump pin my throat and pain in my heart, deep ache, chest is tight, hurting, throat tightens, I want to get away from myself. My jaw clenches and my brain feels like small fireworks are coming out of it, want to run and hide. Collapse, rage, heat, numbness, heart literally aches, tears. A relief in my lower body, relaxing and widening of my chest. It's easier to breathe. Heart aches, gut tightening and hot flash, contracting, tense sadness, tightness in stomach and numbness, shut down. Tears, anger, nausea. Huge sighs, eyes closed, head down. Desire to know the truth. Heaviness around heart. Rage, then dissociation. Just notice we're in very good company with each response, with the relief, with the, like, thank goodness we're talking about this, with the tightness to the bodies, we're all in very good company. Yeah. Okay, now that you've touched into what your body does, see if what your protest is, see if what your body would find most comfortable in a way is if we were able to say, oh, it's just not true. And of course, this is the comfort that's found by, for example, the Florida changing their curriculum to say that enslavement had benefits. See, now that would make your body ease completely, right? That's what's happening for all the folks who are going, oh yes, oh yes. No, that's not what we want. That's not true. That's turning away from the truth. So we want to be able to be with what's true, but we also don't want it to be too hard on our bodies. We want to be able to be with what's true and to be able to be active in whatever creative, contributory way that we have. We don't all need to be out marching with Black Lives Matter signs, but we all do need to be voting. We all do need to be tracking local politics. We all do need to be, writing, sharing, talking on Facebook, noticing, expressing dismay and resistance and outrage. We need to be engaged. So how do we get to be engaged when our bodies may be having a really hard time with what's true? What I'd like you to do is to look, Jaya, will you put the global majority contracts into the chat for me so that those are real easily available for folks? And then also I'll show the screen for the do no harm contract. And you can try out, if you haven't done do no harm before, you can try out do no harm. I like to do no harm every couple of weeks because I really don't like doing harm. I get very angry with myself about doing harm. I walk around trying to think my way through the puzzle or the riddle of having to be alive and do harm. So it's important to stay with it as a long-term exploration. I solemnly swear to you, my essential self, that I will do no harm. See if that's true for you first. And then, or I won't ever hurt anyone. And then we're gonna also look at these contracts as well. And then Jai has the ones for the global majority in the chat. So global majority folks can also do something that's meaningful for you. See either which ones of those are most important to you, or what they inspire, because it might inspire you to different words, right? And then that will help somebody else if they can see in the chat the words that have been inspired for you. As you tap into your body, what does it want? What is it? What does it want your physical body to be able to do? Could be, I will change the world, I will stop this, I will do no harm, I will I'll make the world a better place. There are all kinds of really important things that we could be telling ourselves, or that our bodies could be sort of asking from us, impossible things that our bodies are asking from us. And of course, we're moving towards being very action-oriented and taking lots of action. I'm going to stop the share and take a look at the chat while you guys are putting stuff into the chat. Pam says, you release the same contract every couple of weeks. You start with if you have a sense that you're working with something long-term, Pam, you start with the I will. So I will do no harm. Each couple of weeks, my in order to will be different. If I get them all, then I will be Buddha. Irving, thank you. I won't ever hurt anyone. Oh, so beautiful. Pam says, how does grieving figure into this? It comes a little bit later after we figure out our contracts. Some are coming in, but Irving has a hand up, and I'm loving that Irving does. So hello, Irving.
Oh, hello. I'm so glad to be here. When you were talking about releasing similar contracts over and over, which I find amazing and do a lot of, I find that it's often my in order to is different, but the other thing is different, that's different for me is often who I made the vow to, that I make a very similar or same words vow to my mother, my family, the universe. And each time I find that little nuance, it takes me somewhere deeper.
Oh, beautiful. I
I just
love
want
it.
to share that with folks who haven't done a lot of unconscious contract work.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Irving. I love seeing these here. I'm going to read these aloud. I will actively work to make things better in the world, to be conscious. I will not be helpless, feel helpless. This is me, I'm in tears. Patrice says, feeling unsafe for you to even name these. Sa Angwa says, I will always speak up. Teresa says, I will not cause discomfort to those who wish to remain silent or ignorant. Oh, that's a good one. They're all good, but that sort of, I was like, oh, that hit something inside of me too. Donna Joy is in order to denote a goal we are reaching for. Yeah, it's like, why the heck are we doing this? Why do we have a contract? Not to do any harm. Fred writes, I will keep all the children in the world safe. I will find ways for there to be harmony, says Borisov. Gita says, I will share resources so there will be enough for everybody. Pam acknowledges Patrice. Teresa says, I'm responsible to make the change. Beautiful. And Magdalena started going for her in order to, and everybody else is welcome to go for your in order to as well. Magdalena writes, I swear to my family line I won't ever hurt anyone in order to honor their pain and suffering, no matter the cost to myself. So just again, with these contracts not to hurt anyone, not to do any harm, we really put ourselves in a double bind. It's sort of an odd thing. I'm going to go to the blessing slide. It may help a little bit with people who are wondering how the heck do we get out of these double binds? We get out of these double binds by releasing the contract. I wanted to say, when we break our contracts or we receive notice that we've broken them, rather than releasing them, if we just inadvertently break them. So part of what was happening when we were talking about the harm to folks of the global majority, for white people, there can be a terrible shame. And the shame comes from knowing that we're part of a system that does harm. When we have a contract against it, once we release the contract, though, we want to release the contracts that stop us from being with what is true, so that we can receive feedback and mourn that things didn't happen the way that we intended. This is where it comes in, Pam, is this grieving, is that now with the release of the contract, we get to mourn. We get to grieve. But the answer is not simply, okay, I do harm, I accept that, done. That's not the answer. We need a better blessing. For example, self, I release you from this contract and I revoke this vow. And instead, I give you my blessing to acknowledge your part in systemic harm with humility and without compression, by which I mean, what the heck, we're here with the truth. I'm a part of this. And to join together with others and use your love and your life energy to make your systems better in every regard as you begin to see more and more clearly. So this is where we're heading. That's a proposed blessing. Jai, will you stick that one in the chat? That's a proposed blessing. And for those contracts where we're keeping ourselves alive, the blessing is something like, and to be able to know that I'm not going to be killed everywhere. To know that there are some places where it might be okay to speak up and to begin to explore what that's like, and to learn Roxy's work is incredibly important for having a model to be able to move forward with dialogue and talk about stuff that you never even thought would be possible to talk about. Okay. So this is where we're going. We're going to the question, does it feel like this is a life-serving contract? Yeah, go ahead, Jaya.
Are you intending to share the slides right now? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I was gonna actually move toward the breakout. So yeah, where we're moving toward is the release. I release you from this contract. I revoke this vow. And if you like the blessing that I wrote, you can play with that, or you can change the words of it. but it's kind of got the essence of where we want to go here, which is like to say to our bodies, yeah, this is the truth. It's okay to be here in the truth. It really is. Hi, Fred.
I noticed that a powerful part of the system itself is that this is very nice, you can make a little things, but there's no way you can change me, the system. And feeling this like, well, what is this all about? Why bother with this? What difference can I make in the world? I recognize that this is the system, but it's like this.
Yeah. So let's try it, Fred. I will believe that there's nothing I can do.
Oh shit.
Are you okay for me to pick you out here and to have you? Do you want somebody else to do it and watch it, or?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
You go right to the heart.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Say again what it is.
I will believe there's nothing I can do.
I will believe that there's nothing I can do.
I will believe this in order to.
I will believe this in order to something about not suffer or to not fail.
In order not to fail.
The consequences are so big for everyone in the world if we fail.
Mm, mm, mm. No matter the cost to myself.
No matter the cost to myself or others.
Or others, yeah. How do you like it? How does your essential self like this vow now?
No.
Would you be willing to say, Fred, I release you from this vow?
Fred, I release you from this vow.
And I revoke this contract.
And I revoke this contract.
And instead, I give you my blessing to.
And instead, I give you my blessing. My blessing to joyously something.
Joyously participate.
Yeah.
Joyously join. Joyously
join. Like I see myself like joyously in this crowd marching.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to joyously express my true longings.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. It's wonderful to get a little demo before we go into the breakout groups. Welcome back. There's a question in the chat that I'll answer, and then I'd like to ask you, and you can start now if you'd like. If you got a release and you got a blessing, will you put your blessing into the chat so that people can see and be inspired by the different kinds of blessings that came? Kathy writes, I missed the first few minutes of the session. I want to clarify that the contract is not helpful and needs to change because it's impossible to do no harm. And it creates suffering. Yes, it's impossible to do no harm. And then the contract's rigid and then we can't see the truth. Kathy, is this making sense? You can put your cameras off so you can put it, you're not on my screen, but you can put it in the chat if you'd like. Dorothy writes, a blessing to be just as human as anyone else and just as liable to make mistakes and still to be an okay person so that I can be open to seeing my mistakes and doing things differently as part of making a positive difference in the world. Thank you, Dorothy. Tanya writes, I bless myself to feel what comes because it is the truth and pausing is not stopping. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Tanya. Fred, the blessing that it's okay to fuck up. Lots of hands waving for that one. Wonderful. Priscilla, my blessing is to make mistakes as part of my inquiry into learning, living, and loving. Thank you, Irvine. Then Dorothy loves Fred's blessing. Borislav writes, I give you my blessing to notice and see what is going on and how it is for others, and act out of a fierce love for everything. Oh, Lydia writes, blessings for curiosity and play, and when noticing how my nervous system is responding to witnessing the pain of systemic racism. Thank you, Lydia. Yes, we want to open the doors to activism. And activism looks different for each different person. And one of the things that Roxy and I are doing is we're doing this Fierce Conversations podcast, where we're finding all different kinds of people who do different kinds of anti-racism. So some people, we talked with a composer who works with operas and laments that capture. He's from South Africa. His the most famous sound that he captured was the wail of a woman who found out that her husband was killed during the Truth and Reconciliation hearings. And he spoke to her and said, is it okay if I use your lament, your wail, in a piece of music? And she said, yes, it will be a tribute to my husband. So all kinds of extraordinary folks that we're talking with to be able to broaden our definition of what is anti-racism. How, it's almost like I'm so interested. How does it emerge within each of us? How does it emerge within us? When we let this truth flow through us, how does it come out with our individual voice and our individual interests and passions and creations and work in the world, whether we're working within a corporation asking for expanded hiring practices, whether we're an artist making art, all kinds of beautiful things that people do. Okay, now we have about 10 minutes left. And this is a time, if there are any questions or protests or comments or confusions or whatever's here, just a time for you to ask questions or make comments. And Tanya, hello. Oh, here we get to ask you to unmute. Yeah. Oh, wait.
I did, but we came back. So Sarah, can you, do you want to hear an appreciation?
I'd love to.
It's been a real delight to be here with you. I've missed you.
Oh.
It's my own fault. And I love being here with so many people that I remember from the past, and some of them have greeted me in the DM, but I came in here not thinking I had any contracts about this, and boy, it hit me like a arrow through the heart. You know, not to feel helpless.
Mm.
That was just amazing. So thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. What a pleasure to get to have you with us, and it was wonderful to see in the chat that your Nigerian daughter said that she was here. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And Bonnie writes, need met for connection. Kathy writes, oh, found a blessing. I give you my blessing to acknowledge and grieve the pain of being human and to contribute to others and to life in ways that support everyone thriving, including me. Thank you, Kathy. And Dorothy writes, needs met, Sarah, for beginning to understand the contracts that I hold, given my privilege, and also the contracts that my brothers and sisters may be holding who are oppressed by the system and by individuals. Kathy writes, powerful to just have you read that out loud. Thank you. While you were all in the groups, in the breakout rooms, I just had such a feeling of joy and gratitude that each of you came to this and have the interest in it. And Donna Joy Light writes, listening deeply to others without judgment. Well, there there aren't any questions popping immediately. So let's go to needs met and gifts received, just like what did you get from today's work? And if you have read this, then if you can leave a good if you like this book, if you like what we did today, if you can leave a Goodreads review, that would be amazing, because that really helps. One of the things that happens with anti-racism books is that people who are kind of just globally, who have not yet released their contracts, will get on and just leave a 1 so that they can bring down the rating on the books. So we need folks to leave reviews in order to help mitigate the harm of the folks who have not released their contracts and who are in there trying to make anti-racism go away. Sa Angwa writes, I would absolutely love to continue learning about these contracts. I will join as many meetings going forward as I can. Thank you. Thank you, Sa Angwa. And for folks who might not have a lot of financial resources, but would like to be doing more, because this was a lovely free offering, you can write to help@sarahpeyton.com to get into the Roxy and Sarah series. We've done 2 teachings so far, and there are 6 more, I think. Yes, you can write to help@sarahpeyton.com and do a partial scholarship of whatever amount you need to be able to be in the class. And Gwen and Roger, hello to Gwen and Roger, thank you for being here. Blessing received, participating with folks who have not given up and are willing to take the risk to try. And Gita writes, connection, shared reality, awareness, depth. And Teresa writes, the blessing is clarity and visceral response that naming and witnessing operational contracts inhibit and free up energy to affect and give voice to change. Thank you very much, Teresa. And Borislav writes, need met for awareness and understanding and connection and self-connection. And I have gratitude to Jaya for getting up before 5 a.m. to join me on this call. Thank you, Jaya. All right, we'll let you go. It was lovely to be here. Can we take everybody off mute, Jaya? And if you want to say goodbye, we'd love to hear your voices.
Bye.
you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
you
you.
both.
Thank
Thank you all.
you,
Thank you
Sarah.
so much.
Thank you.